Open up the show with some headlines. Talked a little bit about the Cincinnati Reds. They were in action last night in their final spring training / exhibition / celebration game, if you will, before opening day tomorrow. No injuries happened on the field last night, but the big headline from last night was, of course, the announcement that Austin Hayes is sidelined with an injury for right now, and we just don't know the severity of it, and we'll get more updates throughout the day, and we'll be keeping an eye for that update for you here shortly. But we'll get back into the Reds talk coming up in a second. But excited to bring on our next guest, Paul Fritschner, hanging out with us here today, talking a little Xavier Musketeers, and, of course, Xavier at the forefront of the conversation for a lot of people right now because we were expecting them to name a new head coach. We expected that coach, obviously, to be Chris Mack. He is not the head coach. Obviously, they're going in the direction of Richard Pitino. How do you think all of this went down as far as Richard Pitino when he became a legitimate candidate? Were you hearing rumblings of this, or were you, like everybody else, just assuming that Chris Mack was going to be coming back for another run?
Well, I wasn't assuming. First of all, thanks for having me on, Kenner. I appreciate it. I was not assuming that Mack would be the head coach. I did very much think that Chris Mack would be the leading candidate for this job. I thought that this was a job in the end that would go to Chris Mack. But if there's one thing we know about Xavier's athletic director, Greg Christopher, it's that even though over the last 7 years when he's had to make a hire, even when the hire feels obvious, he's always done his due diligence. If you think back to Travis Steele, right, and some of the names that he interviewed back in Travis Steele. It's a few of the biggest names. TJ Otzelberger was on that list. There were names that Xavier reached out to back in the day when Travis Steele got that job back in 2018. But even still, looking back in 2018, the Travis Steele hire was a layup, right? That was a job that Travis Steele had been working for a long time. He was an assistant under Chris Mack. It was only a matter of time before he got that job. Even though it was a shoo-in that Travis Steele would get the job, Greg Christopher still went out, did his due diligence, interviewed other candidates, wanted to see what the national landscape was about, and then, in the end, hired Travis Steele. In 2022, again, it was a layup. Sean Miller coming back to Xavier, wanting to land on his feet, wanting to get back into coaching after taking the year off, hires Sean Miller. Now here in 2025, Chris Mack obviously had a ton of interest in the job. That was very public. There was no doubt about it that Chris had a ton of interest in it. But we also knew that Greg Christopher was going to be interviewing other candidates. Drew Valentine from Loyola got an interview. You had Richard Pitino, obviously, on that list. There were some other names thrown around. Alan Huss from High Point. John Fanta reported a few names last night on the Twitter Spaces that I did. In the end, though, I did always keep coming back to the fact that I thought it would be Chris Mack. But now what I'm wondering is, was the interest more one-sided? Was a lot of what happened with Chris coming from Chris's camp? And in the end, Greg Christopher and the Xavier administration wanted to hire outside of the family. I mean, this is the first time since 2001 when Thad Matta came to Xavier. This is the first time Xavier's made an outside hire in that long. You went Thad Matta, they went Sean Miller. Chris Mack was an assistant to Sean Miller. Travis Steele was an assistant to Chris Mack. Sean Miller comes back. This is a major shakeup in the landscape of the Xavier basketball program. And to be quite honest, fellas, I think this is a phenomenal hire.
I love the hire, to be honest with you. And I know, like, the thing is, so Chris Mack obviously tied to Xavier. Everyone thought that was a done deal, just like everyone thought Richard Pitino to Villanova was pretty much the done deal on that side of things. When you stack up the Villanova job to the Xavier job, obviously, you look at the Big East right now. I mean, Villanova, in your opinion, Richard Pitino, is it a surprise that he picked Xavier over Villanova? Is Xavier the better job than Villanova? Were you surprised that Richard Pitino picked the Musketeers over Villanova?
I've heard conflicting reports in the last 18. There's been a lot of information thrown around, Kenner, of what's true and what's not true that I've been trying to figure out. Did Pitino have an offer at Villanova that he turned down to take the Xavier job? I've heard that he chose the Xavier job originally over the Villanova job and that Villanova wasn't ever really in play. So I'm trying to sift through what's true and what's not, because obviously those are conflicting reports. Can't both have those things true. But, from a resource perspective, from what Xavier can give Pitino with the donors behind him and with the support of the program behind him. Villanova has won 2 national championships in the last decade. They have a very prominent donor base. I would say that Xavier is as well positioned as almost any school in the Big East for success here going forward, especially if everyone rallies around Richard Pitino and gives him the resources that he needs. Because if you look at his rosters and when he has won, Minnesota is a notoriously tough job to win at. He took him to a couple NCAA tournaments, but he was also very young when he was there. And now he goes to New Mexico, wins back-to-back Mountain West titles, goes to back-to-back NCAA tournaments, and you have some of the most superior talent from a backcourt, from everything else that you had last year, to then have to replace that. Jamal Mashburn, JT Toppin, Jalen House, gone. And you have to replace that coming in this past season. And he did that. And he was doing that at New Mexico, to my knowledge. I don't want to speak for New Mexico if anybody's listening to this, but I'm fairly confident that Xavier, from an NIL perspective, will set Richard Pitino up better than what he was getting at New Mexico. So if he's doing all of that at New Mexico, I'd like to think that that will only improve and get better with the resources that he has at Xavier.
I listened to your spaces last night, Paul. You did a great job with Johnny Fanta.
Thank you very much, Elliot.
You're welcome. I think I found one thing pretty interesting, and I'm curious to see your thoughts on this. Xavier, I don't know what the national media perspective is on Xavier. I as a UC fan, I don't keep much into the what's going on in the Xavier world too much. But I think one thing right now that you're going to get is a lot of interest in the Xavier Musketeers with the Pitino leading your helm. How much national interest do you think there's going to be on the Xavier Musketeers this season?
I mean, you just think about it. Richard Pitino got a tweet from ESPN's main account. Sean Miller was not announced from ESPN's main account, right? I mean, it just goes to show that the Pitino name carries a lot of weight. The fact that you are going to have at least 2, if not 3, matchups every year between Richard Pitino and his father in the Big East. You're going to see him come to Cintas, then you're going to see him, I'm sure, go to Madison Square Garden. They're not going to play that game at Carnesecca. This is a headline-making move because Richard Pitino is going to win. With the resources that Xavier can give him, he's going to win games. And if he gets Xavier to a point where he is developing this program and consistently winning year over year, I don't know how long Rick is going to be coaching at St. John's, and I don't mean to say he's going to leave for somewhere else. He's getting a little up there in age. I don't know how long he's going to be at St. John's, but let's just say it's 3 years, right? Let's just say we get at least 6 matchups between Xavier and St. John's and Richard Pitino and his father. I don't think if you're Xavier, you don't make this hire to grab a headline and to do it for the publicity. You make this hire because it's the right basketball decision. But when you can marry those two things, you do that, and that's what they did.
Sean Miller, is this a betrayal, or is this just how college sports goes?
I have no ill will towards Sean Miller. Absolutely none. He made a decision to go down to Texas to do what he felt he needed to do in his career, to go down to Texas and try to get to a Final Four, try to win a national championship, be a part of the SEC and what that conference has become. He feels like the resources that he has at Texas will set him up the best for success here in the near future. And I wish him all the best down there. He gave me an opportunity. He allowed me to cover the team. I'm very grateful for that. I have no ill will towards him. And that's what I'll say on that.
Yeah. Looking forward to next year. the roster construction. I found this pretty interesting. Going forward with a lot of college basketball teams, you're starting to see it. Woj now a GM of St. Louis. Do you think Xavier would ever
the Bonnies put some respect on the Bonnies?
Was it the
he loves the
Bonnies?
Bonnies.
St. Bonaventure.
It's all
what a
A10 though.
mistake.
It's all
What
it's
a
all
mistake.
A10. Yeah,
A10 doesn't
Tweeted
matter.
a Wojbomb tweet
Question,
for a transfer.
Yeah, I think UC might be poking their head at getting a GM. What are your thoughts on Xavier possibly getting a GM going forward?
Yeah, I haven't spoken to how Richard Pitino is going to construct his staff. I don't know there. But what I will say is the GM position in college basketball is a really intriguing one to me. And it's something that I want to dive into in the offseason because it seems like it's this hot button issue, right, Elliot? Like it's, hold on. That's my bad. It seems like it's this hot button issue to be a GM in college basketball right now. And what I am curious to hear is how many of these GMs actually have roster making decisions. How many coaches at the end of the day are trusting these GMs to actually make roster decisions out of the portal so that the coaches can then coach their team? Or are these GMs just negotiating with agents on NIL, trying to do a lot of the back-end administrative work, all of those things? But at the end of the day, it's really the coaching staff that's making all the roster decisions. I think there are GMs that will make a lot of those calls on who they get and players, things like that. And I think there are a lot of coaches that will still want full control, but just don't want to have to deal with, a college athlete asking for more money and having to negotiate that. Let that role go to the GM.
I've always been fascinated by that too. When you talk about the NIL, because the conflict is the coaches can't run the NIL, and you have your collectives, and usually those are big ego personnel that's running those, and they want to be the ones that say, "Hey, that big star that's running up and down the floor, we did that. We're responsible for that." But and then the pressures of because that collective gave so much money to this player, and the coach doesn't want to play that player. There's some kind of conflict. It's the coach's fault. This can get so messy. So it's like placing a GM that the head coach trusts and that there's just a little bit more unison. I think that plays a pivotal role in all of this as this gets messier and messier. What is, not that you have dollar amounts, and that's not really what I'm asking, but has there been any complaints, any concerns about Xavier's health of their NIL collective? Are they in a healthy spot from a collective standpoint, in your opinion?
Very healthy. I think Xavier's actually set up in the top half of the Big East in NIL. And one asterisk I guess I would put on that is that the whole situation's so fluid, right? I mean, year to year, another school could come in and have a $1 billion donation and the whole thing flips upside down. But the one thing that Xavier will be set up for success for going forward, and there's still a lot that needs to be clarified on this, is the revenue sharing. Because Xavier doesn't have to worry about football. The Big East doesn't have to worry about football. They can dedicate their rev share money to men's basketball and give their programs as much financial support as they can to set them up for success. So from an NIL standpoint, I think Xavier is in a great spot in the top half of the Big East. And I think the national media has really been outwardly spoken about that. You saw Matt Norlander talk about that yesterday. You saw Rob Doster talk about that yesterday. There's been a lot of national support for Xavier in the last 24 hours, especially comparing the Xavier and Texas jobs, which if you look at the facilities of Xavier in Texas and you just look at everything that Texas has compared to what Xavier has, you just jumping off a page, you could see the facility difference. But from a fan support perspective, from a financial support perspective at Xavier and the dedication that Xavier has to making sure their program advances into the future, I don't really have any concerns from that side of things. But it's so fluid that it changes every offseason, and we're only a few off seasons into it. I do think that water is going to find its level on the NIL front here in the next couple of off seasons with revenue sharing, with maybe some things coming back down to normal in the NIL world. We'll see, because you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube. That just can't happen. But is there any regulation to it? We'll see. A lot of unanswered questions right now, Kenner. I'll tell you that.
Paul Fritschner hanging out with us here. I appreciate you popping on last minute with us. Thank you. But last thing on the way out, like, obviously new coach coming in. Richard Pitino had a lot of success at New Mexico because he has a lot of really good players. Obviously, he has that Conference Player of the Year on his roster that everyone's kind of, Villanova fans were excited thinking that he was going to bring him there. What's obviously there's some current players remaining from the Sean Miller era. Obviously, coming in, Richard Pitino has had to bring his guys in. What's the transfer portal look like right now for Xavier? What's the hopes that they do land that star player that they have over at New Mexico? And yes, I am purposely not saying his name because I spaced and don't remember it, to be quite honest.
Donovan Dent. Yeah, Donovan Dent. He will be Donovan Dent will be an All-American guard next year. And there are the biggest names in college basketball, Kansas, Kentucky. The biggest names are pursuing Donovan Dent right now. It has been reported that he is going to drive quite the NIL number this offseason, and what he ends up getting, where he ends up going, is going to be a major question as to how Xavier's roster develops, because I did see a report last night that he had interest in following Pitino to his next job if he took another job. Whether Xavier, has the money or chooses to spend the money to go get Donovan Dent, I will be very interested, because if you think about it, Ryan Conwell has played at a different school every year he's been in college. He started at South Florida, then transferred to Indiana State, came back home a little bit, then transferred up to Xavier. Does Ryan Conwell want to stick around and not play for a fourth different school in 4 years? He'll have to play for his fourth different coach, but does he want to play for his fourth different school in 4 years? Or does he like the stability of being at Xavier? You pair Ryan Conwell with Donovan Dent, and then I don't imagine Dalen Swain comes back next year. I think Dalen Swain is headed up to Jacob Tissett territory. But if you're able to keep Dalen Swain, now here's the thing, that NIL number, to be able to keep Ryan Conwell, Dalen Swain, and Donovan Dent on the same roster, I don't know where you piece the rest of the roster together. I'm just purely speaking of two guys that were on Xavier's team this year, and then you add the best player from New Mexico. That would be the best backcourt, or one of the best backcourts in the country starting day one. The perimeter on that team would be incredible, and then you pair that with whatever you can get out of the transfer portal in the front court. You do have Lucina Traore, who tore his ACL before the season. He is not declared for the transfer portal yet. Neither has Roddy Anderson, who was supposed to be Xavier's point guard next year, paired with Nick Lewis, an incoming high school recruit. So you have a few guys that are still at Xavier that haven't put their name in the portal yet. Just a handful, but a few. And then obviously I'm sure New Mexico, their team and their returners will put their name in the portal. So can you go get a guy like Donovan Dent or True Washington or one of them and get them to follow Coach Pitino to Xavier? I would not be shocked if at least one or two players from New Mexico make their way to Xavier. Look, New Mexico just beat Marquette in the NCAA tournament. And to be quite honest, pretty solidly beat Marquette and almost beat Michigan State. Really should have beaten Michigan State until Sparty made some plays down the stretch. So I'm excited to see what this roster looks like.
I have one last question. Paul, will the Rebound Rundown, is that going to be a good place to find the historic Crown coverage?
The Rebound Rundown will have everything you need to know about the Crown beginning next Tuesday.
Crown.
It's the historic Crown.
Oh, the historic Crown. Is that how you've branded it?
Yeah, it's going to be big. It's going to be the biggest event in sports.
Are you going out? Are you going there?
To Las Vegas? No, unfortunately, it's a Tuesday. It's a work day at noon, so I'll have other plans. Unfortunately,
well, it's the middle of the summer. Take a vacation.
You're right. I guess I could.
Let me ask you this, Elliot. Under 250 people in that arena for that game.
Do the players count or no?
No, spectators.
Okay, spectators.
Training staff and players do not count.
Okay, then I would take the under, and I'd probably take the under on players as well. Active
Cincinnati
players.
and DePaul, 3:00 Eastern, right?
Yeah,
June 15th.
On April Fool's Day, Paul. We'll see you there. It's going to be a real fun party on April Fool's Day in the historic Crown.
If you need some viewing between the Final Four, turn on the Crown.
Yeah. If you were thinking about the Final Four and you want to see real winners, you take on DePaul, who hasn't made the tournament in 21 years, and you take a look at the Bearcats, haven't made one in 7.
Well, tune into the rundown. I'll have everything you need to know about it. Don't you worry, Elliot.
Thanks, Paul. Will you still be the voice of Xavier, by the way? You still going to lead us into the arena?
Oh, is the MC?
Yeah. No.
Yeah.
Not as the MC. I'm just talking about the voice outside the arena, like telling us like
What
kind of bags.
Your safety is my first concern. Yes.
Okay, I just want to make sure.
No.
Sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks, Paul.
Because if you slip and fall, I guess that's on me. So
it is on you. It is on you. I hate to say that. It is on you.
Yeah. No, thanks, guys. I appreciate it.
Paul, you the best. Appreciate you. Thank you.